Assalamu alaikum, brother Faris.
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Barakallah fiqh, mashallah. What is your advice to the parents first who are not bringing their kids to the masjid, who are not teaching their kids even the basics of Islam? And for those also kids who are totally lost, what are you going to say for them?
Okay, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. I think for parents, and I'm speaking not as a parent myself, but just from working with young people and listening to them and hearing what's important to them, I think for parents it's very important just to begin with, to teach them just the basics of the deen when they're very young. Just to teach them the basics of the deen when they're very young.
MashaAllah.
And I think as they get older then, two qualities that I think any parent should embed into a young person are responsibility and empathy. And to give a child that sense of responsibility, that I'm responsible not only for my own actions, but I'm responsible for, other Muslims, or I'm responsible for my environment or my society or other non-Muslims. And to have, and the second quality is empathy. To have, a sense of care for another person. That if we see a person suffering in the streets, that we imagine that we put ourselves in that person's shoes. And I think as Muslims, this is what we should be, that we should be advocates of peace. In regards to your second question, it was advice for the youth.
For the youth, yeah.
For the youth, I'd say the first thing is probably gain some knowledge. Listen to lectures. Knowledge is available everywhere, mashallah. But start listening to lectures and change your environment if you're in a bad environment. If you find yourself around people who are just, drinking alcohol, always speaking just in vain language, cursing all the time, that's just something that's always going to strike the heart, and it's just going to bring you down worse and worse. At the end of the day, probably one of the most important things is just to fix your environment. And that doesn't mean completely neglecting any Christian friends or non-Muslim friends that you have, but it means that you, to some degree, you spend time with the Muslim shabab, that you spend time in the masjid, that you dedicate some of your time to the Quran, the Sunnah, and inshallah, and it's a slow process. In time, your heart will start to really love Islam, will start to come back to Islam again.
Very good, mashallah, jazakallah khair, barakallah fi akhi. So you mean that you are the next generation, you should carry this message seriously, yeah?
Hopefully.
And what do you say for the
It's
boys
most important
or
not
for the
to-
guys on your age?
It's most important to get into it now, because when you're older, when you get into it, you won't really get into your head, you won't like it as much.
Is it necessary for all the Muslims to know how to do da'wah in the West?
Definitely. It's just because if you're anywhere, anyone will ask you a question and you don't know how to answer that question, how are you going to feel? You're just going to feel embarrassed of yourself. I think you just people will just have an impression of Islam that, okay, he doesn't know anything about his religion. Why should we follow what he's thinking? Why do we follow what he believes in? Is maybe he's wrong. He doesn't know what he does. He doesn't know what he's talking about. That means that means not true.
Okay.
That means I shouldn't be following him.
Excellent, very good. What do you advise the parents how to raise their kids? Taking them to.
Most important, bring them to the mosque, because many activities happen in the mosque. People teach Quran. They teach them the fundamentals of Islam. They teach them everything. It's just important to get this into their head when they're small and to enjoy them, not force it upon them, but to actually make them enjoy it. To actually say, oh yeah, I love this. I want to keep doing it no matter what happens.
Jazakallah khair, barakallah fiik, Allah ya'tik al-afiyah, mashallah. Muhammad, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Barakallah fiik, how are you?
Alhamdulillah.
MashaAllah. What is your advice for the youth who are on your age in Ireland here? What should they learn and what should they stay away from?
Well, as I am grown as a youth, I have actually experienced lots in school, streets, where I go. And the youth, if their parents bring them to the mosque, they'd actually love it so much. They would say, yeah, I want to go to the mosque. Better than going to the park. We might see bad people over there. As kids could actually turn really fast. They could turn the other around 180 degrees quickly. So just give advice. And all I say is just that bring your kids when they're small to the mosque, and they'll actually love it. Even if they're around 7, still bring them. They'll actually really love it. Like there is enough space, like no one says stay quiet. It's the house of Allah. You have to respect it. Oh, it's nice.
MashaAllah, tabarakallah, very good. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make you a
Terms,
strong Muslim, yeah?
To raising kids in the West is very important for the parents, especially for the Muslim families. Like the culture and Islam, two are different things. The source of culture is from human perception, and source of Quran is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So sometimes there's a conflict between the Quran, the way of Islam, and the way of culture adopted by the people. So for the children and the parents need to know, and they should aware that their children should know about the religion, about Islam, and the only way of life is acceptable. That's the way of Islam.